All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're cracking open a 2,500-year-old text to find some psychological insights that feel surprisingly, well, modern. We're going to see how just a tiny shift in translating a few ancient words can totally change how we think about who we are. So let's start with a big one. Think about this. What if the key to unlocking some profound ancient wisdom isn't just in the words themselves, but in how we've been translating them all this time? What if a small tweak in language could open up a completely different way of seeing the human mind? So our journey starts with this incredible ancient dialogue, the Cūḻavedallasutta. You have to picture it. It's basically a masterclass, a Q&A session, and we've got front row seats. We're about to listen in on a conversation from over 2,000 years ago in India, and trust me, it's going to get really interesting. So who's in this conversation? Well, on one side, you've got Visākha. He's this really sharp, curious guy asking all the tough questions. And on the other side, Dhammadinnā, an enlightened nun who is praised by the Buddha himself for her incredible wisdom. Their back and forth is basically a step-by-step breakdown of the human experience. Visākha doesn't waste any time. He goes right for the jugular, asking the biggest question of all, one that we are still wrestling with today. What in the world is this thing we call our self, our identity? The specific Pali word he asks about is Sakkaya. Now, if you look this up in a standard modern dictionary, your first translation is probably going to be something like identity or personality. It suggests a solid, single thing, right? A fixed me that we carry around. Okay, but hold on. This is where things get really fascinating. What happens if we put that modern dictionary aside for a second and look at this word through an ancient lens? What if we tried to understand it the way an expert would have 2,500 years ago? This is just so cool. Using an ancient method called Nirodha, which is kind of like linguistic archaeology, we can break the word down to its roots to find its original meaning. Sakkaya splits into two parts. First, sat, which means existing or that which is present, and kaya, which means a group or a collection of things. So you put them together, and suddenly Sakkaya isn't a single identity at all. It means the existing group. And wow, look at the difference this makes. We go from a static noun, identity, which feels solid and permanent, to a dynamic process, the existing group, which is all about flow, components, and constant change. It's not a thing you are, it's a process that's happening. So what's actually in this existing group? Dhammadinnā breaks it down into 5 core parts. First, you've got form, which is just our physical body. Then there's feeling, that constant background hum of pleasant, painful, or neutral. Third is perception, the mental labels we slap on everything. Fourth, formations. Think of these as our deep habits and impulses. And finally, consciousness, the basic awareness of it all. This collection, she says, this is what we're actually pointing to when we say, me. Okay, so if that's the what, the next question is the how. How does this whole process actually run? This brings us to another key component of that group, something called sankhara. You can think of it as the engine driving the whole show. So, sankhara often gets translated as formations or fabrications. A good way to think about them is as the restless, active forces that are always building our inner world. They're the little construction workers of our reality. Dhammadinnā then breaks them down into 3 types, and check out how beautifully these are connected. The bodily formations, that's just your breathing, in and out. The verbal ones, that's the thinking and internal chatter that happens right before you speak. And the mental formations, that's perception and feeling, the very things driving the whole system. Breath, thought, and feeling, it's all one seamless, interconnected process. And then she drops this. It's incredible. It's like a user's manual for the mind. She lays out the exact sequence for how these processes calm down in really deep states of meditation. First, the verbal formations stop. The inner chatter goes quiet. Then, the bodily ones, the breath itself, calms down. And only then, finally, do the mental formations, perception and feeling, cease. It's an amazingly clear roadmap for how to systematically still the mind. All right, so from the deep mechanics of the mind, the conversation then zooms in on one of those key components we talked about before, feeling. How does this fundamental part of our experience really work? According to Dhammadinnā's model, it's actually pretty simple. Every single moment of your life is colored by one of just 3 basic flavors of feeling. It's either pleasant, it's painful, or it's neither, just neutral. That's it. That's the whole menu. And this is the real game changer. It's an insight that feels like it could be pulled straight from a modern therapy textbook. Dhammadinnā explains that each of these feelings triggers a deep, automatic reaction. When a feeling is pleasant, our default tendency is to grasp, to want more. If it's painful, we automatically try to push it away. And what about neutral feelings? The ones we have most of the time, we just ignore them. A subtle form of ignorance. This is our mind's default operating system, just running on autopilot. So after brilliantly mapping out the problem, how we mistake this whole process for a person and get tangled up in these automatic reactions, the entire conversation pivots. It shifts from analysis to the solution. It becomes about the path out. You can almost see Visākha's mind working here. He sees the map and he starts asking these brilliant, what's the counterpart to X questions. He's building a logical chain, step by step. And Dhammadinnā confirms it all. The counterpart to our default ignorance? Knowledge. The counterpart to that knowledge? Liberation. And the counterpart to liberation is Nibbana. So of course, Visākha asks the final logical question. Okay, so what's the counterpart to Nibbana? What comes after that? And this is where Dhammadinnā's answer just changes everything. She gently tells him he's pushed the question too far. The path, she says, doesn't just lead to Nibbana like it's another destination. It merges into it. It's the goal and the very end of the road itself. And that's really the profound takeaway here, isn't it? These words, these brilliant analyses, they're just the map. They can show us the terrain, point us in the right direction, reveal the nuts and bolts of our own minds. But eventually, the map runs out, because the final destination isn't a concept you can think your way to. It's an experience you have to realize for yourself. Which brings us all the way back around to that first huge question. If yourself isn't some solid single thing, but is actually this existing group of forms, feelings, and thoughts all churning along, then who or what is watching the show? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.